This is my ranking of co-op RTS games that I've played based purely on my personal experience. Each one is placed from masterpiece down to trash, depending on how well teamwork works, how strong the real-time strategy feels, and how fun the co-op missions are. Let's get straight into the list. Iron Harvest stood out to me because of its dieselpunk setting and massive mechs stomping across battlefields. I liked how every mission felt more focused on controlling key positions and managing limited resources instead of building huge bases. Playing through the campaigns, I became invested in the conflict between the different nations and wanted to see how the story would unfold. The mech designs were easily my favorite part, with each faction bringing machines that looked and played differently. Some missions pushed my strategy skills more than I expected, and a few difficulty spikes forced me to rethink my approach several times. Even with those frustrating moments, I had a lot of fun experimenting with different unit combinations and watching groups of mechs break through enemy defenses. That lands in the great tier. Age of Empires 4 brought back everything I enjoy about classic RTS games while adding enough new ideas to keep matches interesting. I spent a lot of time building up my economy, expanding across the map, and trying different civilizations with their own strengths and playstyles. The campaigns were also a highlight because they mixed historical battles with documentary-style videos that made the events feel more meaningful. I liked how the game stayed easy to understand while still offering plenty of depth once I started learning better strategies and counters. Multiplayer kept me coming back as well, since matches felt balanced and rewarded smart decisions instead of relying on a single dominant tactic. Even after many hours, I still found new things to learn and improve. That secures a place in my great tier. Battlefleet Gothic Armada 2 let me command massive fleets across space battles that felt very different from most RTS games I have played. Instead of building bases and gathering resources, I spent my time positioning warships, managing abilities, and trying to outmaneuver enemy fleets. I liked the scale of the battles, especially when huge capital ships exchanged fire while smaller vessels supported them from the sides. The different factions also helped keep things interesting because they each played in their own way. The campaigns offered a lot of content, but some missions started to feel repetitive after a while, since many battles followed a similar structure. The learning curve could also be steep because there was a lot of micromanagement involved. I ended up putting it in the good tier. Godsworn caught my attention by mixing ideas from classic RTS games while building its own identity around Baltic mythology. I liked gathering resources, expanding my base, and unlocking stronger units, but the real highlight was fighting alongside powerful gods that could change the flow of a battle. The faction felt familiar enough to learn quickly while still offering unique mechanics that kept matches interesting. I also appreciated the small details found throughout the game, especially how certain units changed visually and mechanically as they became stronger. Exploring the map, clearing neutral enemies, and claiming valuable resources added another layer of strategy beyond simply building an army. Even in its early state, the game showed a lot of promise and delivered battles that kept me engaged. This one lands in the excellent tier. Ancestors' Legacy scratched my itch for a classic RTS while focusing more on squad-based battles than massive armies. I enjoyed capturing villages, securing resources, and slowly expanding my control across the map while preparing for larger fights. The different factions helped keep the gameplay fresh because each one encouraged a different approach to combat. My favorite moments usually came from setting up archers in strong positions or timing cavalry attacks to hit enemy forces from behind. The campaign also offered a nice mix of mission types instead of repeating the same objectives over and over. I did find some infantry battles a little frustrating since they often felt dependent on unit matchups rather than quick tactical decisions. Even so, I had enough fun with its battles and variety. I placed it in the good tier. Men of War Assault Squad 2 offered a much more detailed and demanding RTS experience than most games in the genre. I spent a lot of time managing individual soldiers, vehicles, and tanks while paying attention to things that many strategy games simplify or ignore. One feature I enjoyed was taking direct control of units, which made certain battles feel far more personal and intense. The vehicle damage system also added depth, because losing tracks, weapons, or other components could completely change a fight. Learning the game took some patience, since the tutorial did very little to explain its systems, but things became much more rewarding once I understood how everything worked. Between the large amount of content and tactical gameplay, I kept finding reasons to return. This belongs in the Great Tier. Call to Arms Gates of Hell Ostfront delivered the kind of World War II strategy battles that kept me engaged for a long time, especially when playing in co-op. I liked managing infantry, tanks, artillery, and defensive positions while trying to adapt to changing situations on the battlefield. The detailed combat system made every vehicle and soldier feel important, and I enjoyed taking direct control during intense moments. Some missions could be frustrating, particularly the stealth-focused ones, but they never stopped me from wanting to jump into another battle. The game did not reinvent the formula, yet the visual improvements and refined mechanics helped it feel better to play than many similar RTS titles. Its co-op mode was where I had the most fun, making victories feel much more rewarding. It earns a spot in my excellent tier. Company of Heroes 3 kept me engaged because the battles felt intense, destructive, and full of tactical choices. I enjoyed using different companies and battle groups since each one encouraged a different approach to combat. The maps were also a highlight, offering plenty of opportunities to flank enemy positions, set up defenses, and make use of terrain. Watching buildings collapse under artillery fire and seeing battlefields transform during long engagements added a lot to the experience. I liked the variety found across the campaigns, and the moment-to-moment RTS gameplay remained strong throughout. The larger strategic campaign sounded ambitious, but it never felt as dynamic as I expected, and often lacked meaningful opposition. Even with that disappointment, the core combat remained enjoyable enough to keep me playing. I ended up putting it in the good tier. Terminator Dark Fate Defiance appealed to me because the idea of leading human forces against endless machine armies sounded perfect for an RTS. The battles could be tense and rewarding when everything came together, especially when I had to manage ammunition, supplies, vehicles, and infantry at the same time. I also liked how dangerous the battlefield felt since even small mistakes could lead to serious losses. Fighting Terminators created some memorable moments because they felt powerful and required careful planning to defeat. The problem was that many missions felt too restrictive and often relied on trial and error instead of letting me solve situations in my own way. Some encounters became frustrating because success depended on following very specific solutions. Even with those issues, I still found enough enjoyable moments to place it in the good tier. Mechabellum kept me thinking several moves ahead because every round felt like a battle of predictions and counterplays. I enjoyed studying my opponent's army, adjusting my formation, and finding ways to shut down strategies before they could fully develop. The unit variety added a lot of depth since even simple-looking mechs could become major threats when upgraded in the right way. Watching a carefully planned setup completely dismantle an enemy formation was easily one of the most satisfying parts of the experience. I also liked that success depended more on decision-making than fast reactions, making every victory feel earned through strategy rather than speed. The presentation helped as well, with huge explosions, powerful lasers, and large mechanical armies clashing across the battlefield. It earns a spot in my excellent tier. Total War 3 Kingdoms delivered one of the most engaging strategy campaigns I have played, because there was always something demanding my attention. Managing armies, diplomacy, politics, and rival warlords created a campaign that rarely felt predictable. I spent a lot of time building relationships between characters, recruiting talented generals, and trying to keep ambitious officers satisfied before they caused problems. The battles were also enjoyable, especially in romance mode, where powerful heroes could turn the tide of a fight through duels and special abilities. I liked how every faction had its own mechanics and encouraged different strategies on the campaign map. Even after becoming stronger, the game continued to present meaningful challenges instead of turning into an easy cleanup operation. That secures a place in my excellent tier. Age of Mythology Retold brought back everything I loved about mythological RTS games while improving the experience in ways that felt meaningful. Building civilizations, advancing through ages, and calling upon powerful gods created a blend of strategy and spectacle that few games can match. I enjoyed experimenting with different pantheons because each one offered unique units, abilities, and playstyles that changed how I approached battles. The mythological creatures were a major highlight as well, making every army feel far more exciting than a standard historical force. I also appreciated the visual upgrades, which made the world, god powers, and legendary beasts look better than ever. Between the campaign, skirmishes, and endless strategic possibilities, I found myself wanting to play just one more match. It earns a place in my masterpiece tier. Northgard offered a refreshing mix of RTS and colony management mechanics that kept me invested through long matches. I enjoyed expanding into new territories, securing valuable resources, and balancing the needs of my growing settlement while preparing for threats. The different clans added a lot of replay value because each one encouraged a slightly different strategy and approach to victory. I also liked that winning was not limited to military conquest, allowing me to experiment with alternative paths and objectives. The Viking theme worked really well with the atmosphere, helped by excellent music and a beautiful art style that made every map enjoyable to look at. Some matches could feel a little slow during quieter moments, but the increasing complexity always pulled my attention back. That lands in the great tier. Stronghold Crusader 2 focused heavily on castle building, and that was easily the part I enjoyed most. Designing walls, towers, gatehouses, and defensive positions made every settlement feel like my own fortress, rather than just another RTS base. I also liked balancing the economy, gathering resources, and making sure production chains kept everything running smoothly. Battles could be entertaining when large armies and siege weapons clashed around heavily defended strongholds. The variety of units encouraged different approaches, especially when attacking or defending key positions. Unfortunately, the combat itself often felt less satisfying than the management side because unit behavior could be frustrating and required more micromanagement than I wanted. A few technical issues and annoying enemy lord encounters also hurt the experience. That leaves it in my mediocre tier. Kingdom 2 Crowns blended strategy, base building, and survival mechanics in a way that kept me coming back for just one more run. I spent most of my time expanding my settlement, recruiting new citizens, and trying to strengthen my defenses before the nightly attacks arrived. The simple controls and minimal interface made it easy to understand, but there was still plenty of depth once I started managing larger kingdoms. I also enjoyed how co-op changed the experience, allowing tasks to be divided instead of handling everything alone. The pixel art style and beautiful lighting effects gave the world a unique atmosphere that stood out from many other strategy games I have played. Progress could feel slow at times, and the difficulty was often unforgiving, but this one lands in the great tier. Cossacks 3 captured the feeling of commanding enormous armies in a way that very few RTS games manage. I spent a lot of time expanding my economy, gathering resources, researching technologies, and preparing for battles that could involve hundreds or even thousands of units. Watching massive lines of infantry, cavalry, and artillery clash across the battlefield created some impressive moments. I also liked how important resource management remained throughout a match, since running short on key supplies could quickly create problems. The historical setting gave the game its own identity, and made every faction feel grounded in a specific era. Managing huge armies could become overwhelming at times, and some interface frustrations occasionally slowed things down. Even with those issues, I had enough fun with its large-scale warfare to put it in the good tier. Warhammer 40,000 Dawn of War 3 delivered the large-scale battles I wanted while still letting powerful hero units influence the outcome of a fight. I enjoyed controlling massive armies, capturing resource points, and pushing across the map while balancing regular troops with elite characters. The three factions felt distinct enough that switching between them changed how I approached battles and army composition. The visuals were also a highlight, with huge explosions, giant war machines, and chaotic clashes that perfectly matched the Warhammer 40K universe. Some campaign missions started to feel repetitive, and the amount of micromanagement could become overwhelming when multiple battles were happening at once. I also preferred some mechanics from earlier entries in the series. Even so, the scale, action, and faction variety earned it a place in my great tier. Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition kept proving why it remains one of the most respected RTS games ever made. I spent countless battles managing resources, expanding my economy, advancing through the ages, and building armies capable of handling whatever the enemy sent my way. The huge amount of content meant there was always another civilization, campaign, or strategy worth trying. I also appreciated how the Definitive Edition improved the visuals, interface, and multiplayer experience without changing what made the original special. Even after all these years, few strategy games offer this much depth, replayability, and variety. It earns a place in my masterpiece tier. SpellForce 3 combined role-playing and real-time strategy in a way that felt far more successful than I expected. I enjoyed building up my party, collecting better equipment, and developing characters while also managing settlements, gathering resources, and commanding armies. The blend of genres helped the game stand out because I was constantly switching between leading small adventures and directing larger battles. I also liked how heroes remained important during strategy encounters, giving fights more personality than a standard clash between armies. The world itself was enjoyable to explore, with plenty of quests, companions, and side activities that kept me engaged throughout the campaign. Some battles could become messy when large forces collided, and parts of the story felt familiar, but I still had a great time with it. That earns a place in my great tier. Conan Unconquered took a different approach from most RTS games I played by focusing almost entirely on surviving endless waves of enemies. Instead of expanding across the map and crushing opponents, I spent most of my time strengthening defenses, managing resources, and preparing for the next attack. I liked the pressure of constantly improving my base because every wave introduced stronger threats that could quickly overwhelm weak positions. Features like fire spreading between buildings and disease spreading from fallen enemies added extra challenges that forced me to stay alert. The co-op mode also made the experience much more enjoyable since responsibilities could be shared between 2 players. Unfortunately, the limited amount of content and lack of polish started to become noticeable after a while. In the end, it finds its place in my mediocre tier. Sins of a Solar Empire 2 delivered the kind of massive space warfare that few strategy games can match. I spent hours expanding across star systems, developing planets, researching technologies, and assembling fleets capable of challenging rival empires. What I enjoyed most was watching small skirmishes grow into enormous battles filled with capital ships, fighters, missiles, and heavy cruisers. The different factions also kept things interesting because each one encouraged a different approach to expansion, diplomacy, and warfare. There was always another system to colonize, upgrade to unlock, or fleet to strengthen, which made long matches surprisingly engaging. The amount of mechanics could feel overwhelming at first, and learning everything took time, but the payoff was worth it. That secures its position in my excellent tier. Men of War 2 delivered the detailed battlefield management that I expect from the series while making every unit feel valuable. I spent a lot of time positioning infantry, supporting them with tanks, and trying to make the most of limited reinforcements instead of relying on endless production. The battles became especially enjoyable when different unit types worked together, creating situations where smart tactics mattered more than simply having larger numbers. I also liked the attention given to ammunition, fuel, cover, and vehicle support because it added another layer of strategy to every engagement. The biggest hurdle was the learning curve, as many mechanics were not explained clearly and the interface often felt more complicated than necessary. Even so, once everything started to make sense, I had a good time with it. That places it in the good tier. Arcane Wilds introduced several ideas that made it feel different from the usual RTS formula. I enjoyed building settlements, gathering resources, and expanding into dangerous territory, but the systems around transporting resources and managing expeditions added extra layers of planning. The fantasy version of the Wild West setting also helped it stand out because it combined familiar frontier themes with magic, strange creatures, and unusual factions. I like that matches encouraged long-term preparation rather than simply producing units as quickly as possible. The co-op and skirmish modes showed a lot of potential as well, especially since the game already offered a good amount of replayability during early access. Some mechanics still required too much micromanagement, and parts of the experience felt unfinished, which is expected at this stage. It settles into the good tier. That's where these co-op RTS games land for me. The best ones made teamwork feel rewarding, while a few struggled to stay exciting over time. Thanks for watching.